Hello, lovers of Black true crime. Let me welcome you to the Noir Nation. If I asked you to name me three Black serial killers, could you do it? What about a Black person that's pulled off a heist of epic proportions? Don't worry, I couldn't either. But being a lover of true crime and all things Black, I decided to combine these two passions into a true crime podcast exploring some of the most intriguing and lesser known criminal masterminds with a melanated leading cast. Each week, I will bring you the stories of some of the most prolific criminals you've never heard of. I'm your host, Renee Davis, and this is the Melanin Mayhem podcast. Hey, New War Nation, your favorite country girl is back with another tantalizing tale for your listening pleasure. If this is your first time, welcome. But if you are already down for the cause, welcome back, boo. Now, y'all know the reason I'm doing this podcast is that I want to shed light on the audacious people of color that did sensational crimes, but were not even forgotten by history. They were never even added to the book. But they did some audacious shit. Audacious criminals are part of the fabric of human existence. I just want to make sure that our people are represented as well because we all know ain't a damn thing on this planet that a melanated person wasn't a part of. And because we are there, we put that swag on it. You know, the seasoning, the Which reminds me, the initials of the pod, Melanin Mayhem, MM, that's the sound you make when something is good. You know, That's the gift that Black people give to the world, baby. We bring that And after you hear these stories about these Melanin Mayhem makers, don't you say, I know. Man, I got all kind of stories about all types of criminals. So you never know what to expect from me other than the fact that all the subjects will be melanated. The guy I'm going to tell you about today is small potatoes compared to the other stories that I've told you about. Here's the thing though, audacious, sensational, or just interesting crimes happen in so many different ways. Prolific means highly productive. Getting the job done is being productive. What's that saying? Quality over quantity? You don't always have to have a large body count to be prolific. You can go for the big game kill and get the job done and be prolific, sensational, and even audacious. This week's Melanin Mayhem maker killed three people. The first murder landed him in prison. The second murder should have made him infamous. Allow me to introduce you to this week's Our Melanin Mayhem maker is Mr. Christopher Scarver, aka the Cannibal Killer. Christopher Scarver was born July 6, 1969, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His mama, a woman named Joyce Scarver. Chris had an uneventful early life. He attended school. He went to high school at James Madison High and dropped out in the 11th grade. Now, his mama, like most Black mamas, told him he needed to get up off his ass because you ain't finna be laying around here sucking up my electricity all day. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Christopher had another issue, though, aside from the usual teenage laziness. You see, Christopher was starting to hear voices in his head. And I'm not talking about the kind of voice that, you have when you have an internal dialogue. We all talk to ourselves in our head. No, not like that. I'm talking he was hearing voices of others telling him all kinds of fantastical things in his head. Nowadays, the head doctors call that shit schizophrenia. But in 1986, in Black households in America, it was called sit your ass down somewhere. Y'all know we were not going to no therapist and no psychiatrist back then. Hell, some of us still don't go now. That's not to say that there was not mental illness, because there was. It just wasn't addressed. Nobody talked about it except when they took it to the Lord in prayer. Tell me I'm lying. Y'all know it was prayed out. We attempted to beat it out. We drunk it out. We tried to smoke it out. We tried to drug it out. You name it. We did everything except talk to a professional. So Christopher is an undiagnosed schizophrenic. In his head, the voices are telling him that he is the chosen one. And he's trying to drown out the voices by drinking them away, which causes problems at his mama's house because she ain't trying to see her teenage son not doing shit but drinking, right? She has other kids in the house and they are looking up to their older brother. They're starting to emulate some of the behaviors that Chris ass is running her crazy doing. Oh, we can't have that. Oh, no, no, no. So the problem gets exacerbated because she doesn't understand. She doesn't know how to fix it. Arguing, cussing, fussing, and praying ain't having no effect. So she does the next thing on the list of what to do when you're overwhelmed by the actions of your damn near grown children. She kicks him out. You guys to get the fuck up out of here. Christopher is on the streets. He's got a girlfriend, so maybe he's able to spend a couple of nights at the house wherever she lives with her family. He's probably doing a little bit of couch surfing, sleeping at whoever house will open up the door and let him come on in. Well, at some point in time, in between time, Chris's girlfriend gets pregnant. So look, Chris is about to be a daddy. He has to get his shit all the way together, right? So in 1989, Christopher went to the Wisconsin Conservation Corps, aka Job Corps. If you country, Job Co. Yep, he went over there to learn a trade. And so his trade that he decided to learn was carpentry, which is not a bad choice. Jesus was a carpenter. A man that can build something can stay employed, right? So he's going every day. This job has given him a purpose now. No more laying around and getting drunk and shit, right? Trying to do the right thing, Chris really commits to the Job Corps. He gets in good with one of the supervisors at the Corps, a man named Edward Patz. This guy is just hyping Chris up. He's telling him how good of a job that he's doing. You know, keep up the good work, man. You keep going like this, there is definitely going to be a real job for you when you graduate. And I can see Chris soaking all of this in. You know, he's giving it all he's got. He is trying to make a good impression and land that good job. He could probably see his future being able to provide for his lady and his baby, shoot his mama a little something, you know, have Sunday dinners where he get the big piece of chicken. Shit was looking bright. Probably had a little pep in his step. You know, confidence will do that to you. It'll make you walk a little taller with your chest poked out a little bit. Well, sometimes life will throw a curveball and just fuck up all the plans that you've made. And in Christopher's case, it was the departure of Edward, the supervisor that he was cool with, the one who was building him up and making all these promises. You see, Edward was replaced, and the new guy, a man named Steve Lohman, he was not impressed by Chris in the least little bit, apparently. That bright future that Christopher was banking on, that shit went up in smoke. That full-time job that he was expecting, it's not materializing. You know, Chris is asking the new guy, hey man, when am I be able to start? You know, what's taking so long, my guy? You know, all of the questions that you start asking when you aren't seeing any forward momentum. And the answers that are coming at Chris are not what he is trying to hear. Because y'all know, if that shit ain't in writing, you damn near have to have a video of the conversation and a hand sworn out affidavit. And even then, a motherfucker will swear that's not what was said. And the next thing you know, in January of 1990, Christopher was fired from the Job Corps. God damn it, man. Chris is seeing his future going up in smoke, and seemingly he starts to spiral out of control a little bit. The voices in his head are telling him, man, this some bullshit. Y'all, please tell me why I can hear the voices in his head like they in my head. But in my head, it's like Glorilla, and they saying, yeah, Glow. Before I let a bitch play with me, I'll eat some jail food. That's what they were saying to Chris. Yeah, Chris. Fuck that shit, Chris. Chris, go get your head right, Chris. So, Chris is fixing to go up there to this office, because these motherfuckers owe him some money. They playing with him. Get the fuck out of here. He has to sit with that shit for a few months while he's self-medicating with booze and drugs. He ain't got no job. He ain't got no money. He got a little habit. And he got a baby on the way. Man, this shit is not gonna end well. He's on a low simmer, but now, you know, over the next 5 months, shit gonna come to a head. And on June 1st, 1990, Christopher wakes up on one. Like he was on 1000. Summertime is over. We're at a rolling boil now. Today is the motherfucking day somebody gonna tell me something. For the last 5, 6 months, all of his suffering is because of them motherfuckers down there at Job Corps. So what he do? He goes off to the Job Corps to go get some straightening. And a supervisor, a man named John Fayen, Steve Loman, that's the one that Christopher already had a beef with, right? They were in the office doing whatever it was that they were doing on a regular day in the Job Corps office. Basically, they were minding their own business. Christopher bust up in there on 10, right? Where my money? Y'all motherfuckers owe me and I want my shit right now. Y'all know that's where that commercial came from. You know the one, J.G. Wentworth? It's my money and I want it now. They got that shit from Chris. Anyway, he's in the office. He up here hooping and hollering and just carrying on. John, the head person with the most rank in the office at the time between the two men, John hit him with, good man, I don't know what you're talking about. You need to talk to somebody in payroll, and she ain't working today. Why don't you just come back up here tomorrow and talk to her? And Steve Loman, he's sitting up in that bit like, you know what? This ain't got shit to do with me. He tried to put his church finger up and walk up out the door, but Chris gave him that look. You know the one that, oh, you think I'm playing with you? Look. And then he turned and walked out the office. John and Steve think everything is fine. They misread the look. They missed some context clues. Maybe this was their first time in the presence of a crazy motherfucker. I don't know. But either way, they stayed in that office and they thought that they were going to go back to their regularly scheduled programming. Wrong. This nigga Chris was gone like 2 or 3 minutes before he popped back up in that bitch. He tells John, I need my money now. And John is really not picking up what Christopher is putting down. Again, he is missing all of the signs that this nigga is really on one right now. And this nigga is fixing to risk it all. And he keeps repeating the same 3 words over and over again. I need money. And probably when the thought was forming in Steve's head that this nigga is crazy, it was too late. Chris came out with that Peacemaker, a semi-automatic 25. And he tells Steve, the one that ain't got shit to do with promotions or payroll. He tells Steve, lay it down. And Steve does what he is told. Then John, John, the supervisor, a day late and $1 short, John. Now that Steve on the floor, now he want to play let's make a deal. He tells Chris, I ain't got no check for you, but if you need a little something, I got a little piece of change in my pocket that you can have, man. I got this $15 right here. You can have this. Chris look at John like, oh, you really trying to play me? Fuck I'm gonna do with $15? Note to you all in the New Orleans Nation, if by chance you are ever in a robbery type situation, please don't give a robber $15. You gonna fuck around and end up dead. Just say you ain't got no money, and then when they rifle through your pockets or your pocketbook or your wallet or whatever, and they find them $15, they won't feel insulted. You know what I'm saying? They still gonna take the $15, but you can't present $15 to them because that's gonna fuck around and get you killed, right? So what does Christopher do? What any not sane person does in this situation? He shoots Steve in the head. The motherfucker that ain't got shit to do with nothing, that ain't said shit the whole entire time. He shot the fuck out of Steve, but not enough to kill him. Just enough to let him and John know that the situation needed their full attention. So Steve, he laying on the ground, bleeding, moaning, trying to wiggle the fuck up out of there. And John started trying to reason with Chris some more. He pulled a credit card out his wallet since the little funky $15 wasn't enough. He say something like, man, we ain't got no cash up in here. Ain't nothing in this office but checks. So Chris tell him, well, shit, write me a motherfucking check then. Make that $3,000. And John did that shit. He was not trying to bargain no more with Christopher. Steve already got a bullet. John just trying to stay alive. He writes the check, hands that motherfucker to Chris along with them $15. Now, instead of Chris taking the money and dipping, he shoots Steve again in the head. And he tell John, this ain't enough. What, nigga? Like, will you stop shooting this man? Steve has got to be close to the upper room by this point for some shit that ain't got nothing to do with him. Talk about you should have took a PTO day today, boo. Cause if it were me and I was still able to form a coherent sentence with these 2 bullets in my head, I'd have told Chris, look here, this next bullet need to go to him, cause I already got 2 to his 0. I ain't even got nothing to do with this shit. Anyway, John done gave him a hot check. He done gave him all the money that he had in his pocket, gave him his credit card, and this nigga is still talking about it ain't enough. So John trying to think fast, right? Cause he realizing now that the situation is really dire. John realizes that he has his paycheck, his actual pay wages. His paycheck is in his wallet. So he pull out the check and he endorse it over to Christopher. Christopher, look at the check, put it in his pocket, and then shoot Steve again in the head. Steve is officially part of the ancestral plane now. Like, you done shot this man 3 times in his head. Chris, stop! Steve laying on the floor dead. And Chris still got demands. Now he want the man car keys. John give him the keys. Then Chris tell John to lay on the floor. Well, John seen that shit didn't work out too good for Steve ass, and he wasn't trying to go out like that. So now it's now or never, right? He gonna have to make something happen. And somehow, some way, he managed to push Chris out the way and tell it out the office and get away from Chris and his gun. Man, let me tell you, that man was Usain Bolt up in that motherfucker. He was Forrest Gump running for his whole entire life. Do you hear me, church? He gets away. Damn it, Chris. You could have just had a robbery charge. Maybe an assault and battery for roughing him up. Now you done fucked around and booked that thing up to first-degree murder. Shit. It wasn't like John didn't know who did it. When he talked to the authorities, he sent them directly to Christopher. And his ass was in handcuffs less than 2 hours later. They arrested him over at his girlfriend's house. I guess Christopher wanted to go see his baby mama one more time because he knew the shit was about to go down. When they found him, he had the gun, he had John's wallet, he got the credit card, he got the checks. Like, nigga, you ain't even try to get rid of the evidence. Lord, Miss Gussie. They take Chris in without any issues, and he tells them, I had planned on turning myself in, but y'all beat me to the punch. And during the interrogation, Chris tells them about the voices in his head. And I do mean voices in the plural sense. Because you see, Christopher say he got a whole family of motherfuckers in his head. 4 to be exact. A full nuclear family. Mother, father, son, and daughter. And they told him during one of their group sessions that he needed to go on up there to the Job Corps and set that thing off. Now, they did tell him that he would be arrested, but they said, don't worry about it, man. You'll be all right. And they kept telling him that shit over and over and over again. And y'all know how peer pressure is. Chris didn't have no choice but to give in to their demands. Well, they charged him with 1 count of first-degree intentional homicide and robbery with use of force. And, he tried to plead insanity. And, nah, nigga, you are sane enough to stand trial. And stand trial he did. He still pleaded insanity. And on the stand, he told them that he was the son of God. And the jury said, okay. That's fine. And then they convicted and sentenced his ass to life in prison. But they did give him the possibility of parole. See, this all went down in 92. And with parole on the board, he would have been eligible for parole in 2042. And so after that, off he went to Shawshank. Not Shawshank for real, but for me, anytime somebody go to prison, they going to Shawshank. So even though he is clearly mentally ill, that didn't factor into his sentencing. That didn't factor into his court case. Instead of sending him somewhere where he could get help, they sent him to prison. He's off to Supermax. But when he gets to the prison, they put him on the psych ward. So you knew he was mentally compromised when he got to the prison, but y'all didn't know that when he was in court. Christopher is settling into life as state property. He's inmate number 117801. When he first heads off to prison, he's taken to the Dodge Correctional Institute in Waupun, Wisconsin. And when I say settling in, I don't mean that Chris wasn't still sitting it off in that motherfucker. He still had a few incidents here and there, like the one in 92 when Chris got into, shall we call it, a little kerfluffle with the guards. See, what had happened was Chris was in the dining room or the prison processing center when some way some shit popped off. And the story is that Chris attacked a guard with a 14-inch board that had nails in it wrapped up in a sock. How the fuck did you get that, Chris? That's not your everyday run-of-the-mill shank. That's like a custom-made weapon from prison. Like, where did you go? Shanks are us? They say it took 4 COs to get Chris under control. And when it was all said and done, they walked away with cuts and bruises, and one of them had a sprained ankle, and Chris went off to the hole for that shit. While he was there, he spent some time with the prison psychiatrist, and at this point, Chris has wrapped himself snug as a bug in a rug in the full armor of religion now. He is walking with the Lord, and he is the chosen one. He told them that the voices told him that he was the son of God. See, cause his name was Chris, and you can't get Christ without Chris. You know, it's just missing the T. And he was a carpenter just like Jesus was a carpenter. And his mama name was Mary too, even though his mama's name is Joyce. But you know, okay, if you say your mama name Mary, then that's her goddamn name. I also read that he tried to unalive himself a couple of times. They say one time he set fire to his body, a la Richard Pryor style. I don't really know if that account is true or not, but if it is true, he was unsuccessful in his attempts, praise God. They bounced that ass over to the Columbia Correctional Institute, and that move would set forth a course of events that would change the rest of Christopher's life. You see, Columbia was a supermax where they sent the worst of the worst of the worst. One inmate in particular that was a household name, a man by the name of Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah, that Jeffrey Dahmer. That motherfucker that liked to eat little boys' penises and shit. The only one that you've ever heard of that last name. Side note, like, did they retire that name like a jersey after they convicted his ass? Cause I ain't never seen a bitch with the last name Dahmer since. Like, where's mom and dad and them? Are there any Dahmers left in the world, or did they just permanently retire that name? I don't know. I have to look that up. But anywho, it's enough stuff out here in the world about J.E., so he's not going to get a whole lot of airtime on the pod like that. I'm going to give you some basic information, but you already know who he is and what he did, and you know that he was a hated motherfucker. That shit didn't stop when he got to prison. His first year in prison, he was in solitary confinement because, you know, he was a risk of getting fucked up, so they kept him under wraps, and he did that shit for about a year, but he didn't like it, and so he told them, I want to go to general population. And so they sent his ass to general population. So JD is in the mix of prison life, you know? Everybody see him and he see everybody. He likes to taunt them. Apparently one of his favorite one-liners was an old bullshit line where he say, I bite. Nigga, we know that shit. But you know, the media would have had you believe that when he went to prison that he changed his life and he found Christ. But according to Chris, don't believe the hype. That nigga Dahmer was a bastard before he went to prison, and he remained so behind bars. He would play with his food. And when I say play with his food, I mean he would mash it all up and make it into the shape of a body part and then put ketchup on it like it was blood and then eat it. Like I said, the nigga was taunting people, you know? Most people draw the line at cannibalism, right? You can kill a motherfucker all day and twice on Sunday. Just don't eat their ass. Literally. And you know, then there's that little matter, like I said, of the crimes that this cannibal motherfucker committed against these melanated men, right? Because most of his victims were black. So, you know, that shit didn't sit well with the bros in the prison, right? And Christopher, I told you he was on his mega super uber religious shit at this time. And he was real big on you repenting for your sins. And if he didn't feel like you were repentant, then you were on his shit list. Because remember, he is the chosen one. He is the vessel that God has chosen to smite anybody that's not repentant for their sins. Could possibly go wrong? Well, again, famous prisoner, everybody know who he is. You know somebody wanted to tag that ass. But they can't get at JD because he has a security detail on his ass. Somebody is watching him, just him, at all times. An attempt is made, but nothing that really amounted to anything. Like there was this one time this black dude named Osvaldo Durthy. He tried to shank JD at the church. You know, the prison chapel. But his weapon wasn't built for it tough. And that shit just kind of broke apart. It ain't even hardly scratched JD. And the guards was on his ass in like 2.2 seconds because, again, JD had a protective detail at all times. How could anybody put their paws on JD when he got top flight 24/7? But you gotta think that this situation was just a powder keg waiting for a spark. And on an elementary level, there's some real nanny boo shit. You know what I'm saying? This little nigga that's fucking with you, but you can't get to his ass. He always right under the teacher or the principal, or in this case, a CO. And all that does is breed contempt. Everybody is just waiting on conditions to fall just right so they can get their lick back. And as for Christopher, he is repulsed by JD, and he don't want no parts of his ass. He know who he is and what he's done, and he ain't with no parts of it. He stays as far away as humanly possible within the confines of a goddamn prison to make sure that he does not cross paths with JD. Well, November 28th, 1994, it started out like any other inmate prison day. But I wonder, did Christopher know that before 9 a.m. he would be a killer for the second time? Now, if you didn't know this, inmates work. The guards are there to be a guard, not run a hotel. That's the inmate's job. Ain't no janitors or no cafeteria workers that are being hired at the prison. That's inmates' jobs. Everything that makes that motherfucking prison run, and a few extra industries, depending on what prison we're talking about, all of that shit's done in-house. They got a shitload of free captive labor. So Chris works in the prison just like everybody else, and on November 28th, 1994, they assigned him a work detail to clean the prison gym. Okay, no problems. Chris is not fucked up about that. He gonna go do his work. Well, he wasn't alone on this detail. He had two other inmates joining him, a man named Jesse Anderson and a man named Jeffrey Dahmer. And don't you know, as luck would have it on this particular day, Chris, Jeffrey, and Jesse are alone. There is not a guard in sight. It's almost like it was gift wrapped and tied with a bow for this happenstance to occur. And y'all know Christopher is still hearing these voices, and they've been telling him that he's God's vessel. He is to be used to cleanse the wicked from the midst. And who the fuck is more wicked than Jeffrey Dahmer at this point? No one. So, how the ass whooping killation actually took place, the details are all over the place. What we do know for facts is that the inmates were left alone in the gym. Chris says that one of them poked him in his back, and then the family of voices in his head said, "Finish them." And so he did. Chris beat Dahmer to death, literally. He channeled the strength from the ancestors to whoop both them white boys to death. Like, Chris ain't no big nigga by no stretch of the imagination. He's rather scrawny, and 2 against 1 should have been an unfair fight. But 2 against crazy? Them white boys didn't stand a chance. Man, Christopher beat Jeffrey Dahmer with a steel bar from a sit-up bench. And when I say beat, I mean that motherfucker beat his ass. He beat the cannibal until his motherfucking head caved in. Then Jesse came around to see what was happening, and then he got his head beat in too. Now this nigga Jesse, he wasn't no angel. He killed his wife and tried to blame it on 2 black men. Oh yeah, real piece of work here. His wife, they had been married for buku years. She the mother of his children. He kills her and then concocts a story that 2 black men had came in and did it, and he even gave the police a fitty cap and told them that he had knocked it off the head of one of the black men. Well, come to find out, somebody seen the story on the news and they called the police and told them, "No, that man bought that cap from me on the street. That's my cap. Don't be running no DNA and come looking at me." And so they realized that, oh, Jesse was a lying liar who killed his wife, and then they sent his ass up the road. So Christopher was judge, jury, and executioner on that ass for that little bit of bullshit that you did. I'm just saying. Yeah. Now, mind you, while all this head banging, this literal head banging is going on, you mean to tell me ain't nobody heard shit? Like, was this a silent beating? Stop hurting me. Don't hit me anymore, Chris. Stop. Is that what they were doing? Apparently so, because after beating both of these men to death, Christopher got up and went back to his cell. And when he got there, he was questioned by one of the guards who wanted to know why he was back so early. What? You not gonna ask him why he got blood on his clothes? No, that's not important? Okay. Well, Christopher just tells the man, quote, "God told me to do it. You'll hear about it on the 6 o'clock news. Jesse Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer dead." Now, somewhere around this point, the people that are supposed to be guarding the inmates start back doing their job. And at 8:10 in the morning, they find Dahmer and Anderson. Some say just barely clinging in life. Other folks say they was already dead. Either way, they wasn't here much longer. Now check this shit out. The Department of Corrections did an internal investigation, and according to them, there was no evidence of criminal wrongdoing by the guards or any other prison personnel, even though they could not exactly say where the guards were during the attack or if they were negligent in performing their job. Okay. It sounds like a clear case of negligence to me. Dahmer was a VIP criminal. They have them. And this dude had his own personal guard at all times. Somebody was supposed to have their eyes on that ass. But that ain't negligence, right? Sure. I don't subscribe to conspiracy theories much. But when I do, it's because some shit don't smell right. And this shit don't smell right. You've got a mentally unstable man that has said that he doesn't like the cannibal dude, yet somehow he ends up on a private work detail without a guard in sight? Come on, man. Ray Charles could see that this was a setup. The guards couldn't Rodney King that ass because he was a VIP. It was too many eyes, so that leaves only another inmate to do it. It wasn't like they hadn't tried before. The way I see it, the guards was like, you know what? We're going to put little crazy over there. We're going to let him do it. Chance and opportunity was all that he needed, and they gave it to Christopher gift wrapped on a platter. Now, maybe I watched too many prison dramas. I do love a good prison drama. And Oz probably really scarred and caused a lot of trauma, but it was one of my favorite shows back in the day. I have also known my fair share of incarcerated people. Them guards be on some bullshit. In my mind, they were pissed at having to be Dahmer's babysitter, and they wanted his ass dead just as much as the inmates. You see, the COs are the ones with the power in the prison, right? They have the power to move the pieces on the chessboard that is called prison, right? You mean for years, nobody could get within spitting distance of Jeffrey Dahmer, but on this particular day, the standard operating procedure for a VIP inmate was disregarded? Nobody heard a thing? That means nobody nowhere near the goddamn crime scene. That means somebody didn't follow orders to be the security detail for JD. But y'all didn't find no wrongdoing by the staff? Okay. Okay, that's some bullshit. I also think it's karma. JD was a particularly nasty piece of work. Will anybody share his violent death? Probably his parents, because that's what you're supposed to do. But everybody else was like, okay, moving on. Now, after killing Dahmer and Anderson, they did send Christopher's ass to solitary confinement, and they didn't let nobody from the outside talk to Chris. Of course they did that. They had to keep this little conspiracy under wraps. If you cut off contact with the perpetrator, you can spin your own narrative, right? You can play up the fact that Christopher is mentally unstable. And when the people were finally able to get to Chris, every time somebody asked him why he did it, he had a different answer of some variation of it was God's will and he was just a tool of the spirit, right? But Chris really was coming apart at the seams, y'all. You see, in solitary confinement, the conditions are far from ideal. Like, the main big thing is that the lights were on 24/7. That'll fuck up anybody's mental, right? That's what they do with psychological warfare. Play that rock music and shit or heavy metal music and leave the lights on. That'll have you fucked up. Like, you need darkness. Your body needs to reset. And 24/7 every single day, you never see darkness. Man, please, Chris was losing it. He was already on antipsychotics. And that shit even started fucking with his medicine, right? The medicine wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. Eventually, Chris petitioned the court several times and requested to be taken out of solitary confinement. And eventually he was, right? But as to these new murders that he's got, he made a court appearance and they charged him with 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of habitual criminality and 2 counts of use of a dangerous weapon. And Chris pleaded guilty, no contest to all his charges. And for that, they gave him 2 additional life sentences for a total of 3 life sentences. Wow, Chris. He was still incarcerated at the Supermax prison in Wisconsin. But it looks like he petitioned to be transferred to a federal prison. And they're kind of keeping it under wraps because I could not find where he was. I usually can find out fairly quickly what prison a prisoner is in if they're still alive. But his roster only shows that he's in another location out of state. Ooh, here's a fun fact. This episode comes out on Wednesdays, right? This Wednesday is July 3rd, and Christopher's birthday is this Saturday, July the 6th. Y'all wish old Chris a happy double nickel birthday, because he'll be 55 this Saturday, boo. Now, since all of this, Christopher has become an author. He has a set of poetry books that are available on Amazon, and I've skimmed over one. And my grandmama used to say that if you can't say nothing nice, just be general, right? And so I'll just leave it at Christopher has a set of poetry books available on Amazon. If you so choose to have some money that you just want to poet with, be my guest. Before I let y'all go, I wonder Christopher had been able to get that help he needed when he was young, how his life might have been different. If his mental health had been made a priority, maybe he never would have killed Steve Loman. Mental health is not a new crisis. It's been a crisis for many, many decades. But unfortunately, melanated people carry the brunt of the fallout when mental health is ignored. The jails and the prisons are filled with people that need mental health care rather than incarceration. But that's a topic for another day on another podcast. So, Noir Nation, this has been the story of inmate 241452. He got a new inmate number when he got the last two life sentences. A man by the name of Christopher Scarver, the melanated mayhem maker that killed Jeffrey Dahmer. I hope that you have enjoyed the story of old Christopher. And look him up. He's still out here kicking it. He's got a son that's out here doing some things and whatnot. But at this point, I know you know the drill. Right there on your screen. Like, subscribe, or even leave a review. Do your girl a solid and show me some love. Because I would love it if you would leave me a review. Just let me know that you're listening to the podcast. Or if you don't feel like typing, just hit that 5-star. I'm good with that too. And then I need you to be free with your love, honey. Don't keep this all to yourself. You've got to share me with the people that you love and the people you like, even the people you don't like. Tell all your friends and all your family. Put me in the group chat, dog. If you're on social media, you can find me on Twitter at Melanin Mayhem PC. On Facebook and Instagram, I am Melanin Mayhem Podcast. And if you know of a melanated mayhem maker that you'd like for me to do an episode on, just drop me a line over at melaninmayhempodcast@gmail.com. Until next week, Noir Nation, I need y'all to stay safe. I need y'all to stay vigilant. And remember, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. It's one love, Noir Nation, and I am out.